Sirens in the distance, bass in the dance, a name whispered in fear and respect. From Kingston's tight lanes to Miami corners and New York high-rises, one posse turned street hustle into a shadow empire, mixing politics, product, and pure firepower. Bodies dropped, money moved, and whole blocks learned new rules. Some called it order, most called it war. This is the story the rumors only hint at. The dons, the cliques, the coded phone calls, and the night when the city holds its breath. No fairy tales here, just the real grind that made headlines and ghosts. Lock in because the streets remember everything. Join us as we follow the power, the pressure, and the price of the Shower Posse's reign. The Shower Posse rose out of the fire of Kingston politics around 1981. The fuse was lit a little earlier when Claudius Massup went down in a shootout with police in February 1979. Lester Lloyd, Jim Brown Coke, stepped in as the Jamaica Labor Party's chief enforcer in West Kingston. He turned Tivoli Gardens into a fortified garrison where soldiers in street clothes took orders and the block moved when the Don spoke. When the 1980 election flipped power and Edward Seaga's JLP ousted Michael Manley's PNP, U.S.-backed ganja eradication torched fields and money dried up, Jamaica became a transit yard for South American cocaine racing toward American cities. A new hustle replaced the old one, and the crew that would be called the Shower Posse learned to move product fast and swing iron even faster. People argued about the name while the streets settled it with fear. Some said politicians had promised to shower supporters with gifts. Others said the posse would shower enemies with bullets. A third view tied it to the JLP's shower slogan, answering the PNP's power. Whatever its roots, the label carried weight. The core game was ruthless and simple. Distribute crack cocaine and marijuana. Steal or buy guns. Ship them out. Use violence to lock turf. They stayed tight with the JLP politics, and as it was said in hushed tones, caught CIA arms, training, and transport on the way to U.S. ground. That is why plugs and politics overlapped, lanes opened when the crew demanded them, and heat showed up when anyone stood in the way. Jim Brown held court in Kingston, and Vivian Blake ran the American grind. They built cells in Miami, New York City, Kansas City, Chicago, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and more. They posted up in Jamaican communities and pushed hard. They became the first Jamaican gang to break out of New York City into South Jersey. They filled those small city grids with corners, stash spots, and lieutenants who paid tribute up the chain. Blake planted a flag in Toronto to stage moves, feed New York fast, and ship hitters or couriers wherever the bag called. New Jersey turned into a spread of lines through Newark, East Orange, Irvington, Camden, Atlantic City, Vineland, Trenton, and Bridgeton. Gatehouses never slept, and the message was clear. They were not visiting. They were planting roots and pushing weight without fear. That truth bled into the open on August 4th, 1985. A picnic in Oakland, New Jersey turned into a public war as the Shower Posse and the Brooklyn Bronx Spangler Posse clashed with the Boston-based Dog Posse and the Tel Aviv Posse. Shots ripped in front of roughly 2,000 people, 3 dead, 9 wounded. Police collected 33 handguns off the grass as proof that the late 80s code was simple. Hard beefs, heavy metal, no one backing down. That same year, Donovan Clark launched a Shower Posse cell in Philadelphia and South Jersey counties, like Atlantic, Burlington, and Camden. A dirty war lit up Southwest Philadelphia between the Junior Black Mafia and the Posse and stretched into the early 90s. Every block that made money became a battlefield and corners flipped under pressure. City after city, the playbook copied itself. Law enforcement counted at least 40 Jamaican posses with an estimated 10,000 members working the United States, Canada, Britain, and the Caribbean. They called them some of the most violent crews they had faced. The stack of bodies rose as crack money flooded corners. Crews added kidnappings, robberies, frauds, and cash washing to the grind. The only thread that mattered was Jamaica, so soldiers could switch crews when it suited the bag. The crack economy gave them jet fuel. Cooks flipped powder into cheap off-white rocks with baking soda or ammonia and water. They let it harden, cut it, packed it in vials, and sold rocks of around 100 milligrams for $5 to $10. People smoked in glass pipes or crumbled it into a smoke. The hit landed in seconds through the lungs, so users felt like having the top of their head blown off for a few minutes, and then crashed into a craving that made them chase again and again. Snorting powder took 1 to 3 minutes to hit and lasted 20 to 30, so crack felt cheaper, easier to hide, and less risky than needles. Demand exploded. Foot traffic stayed steady. Flips were quick. Windows stayed busy. That cycle jammed dopamine in the brain and kept it active too long. It trained people to smoke again just to feel normal. Binge patterns got ugly, and cues like a corner, a face, or a smell could bring the urge back. Household surveys showed casual cocaine use, dropping between 1985 and 1990, but the street story cut the other way. Current use fell while weekly and daily use rose. Crack use among people who had used cocaine that past year ticked up. Health leaders called them many pockets of serious drug problems. Hotlines shifted from mostly middle or upper class men to a broader mix that included unemployed callers and suburban users. Street intel said the new users were young, often jobless, in unstable homes, and starting early. Many teens who tried crack preferred it to powder because it was stronger and easier to get. Even as general numbers dipped, deaths kept climbing from the mid-80s to the decade's end. Emergency rooms logged cocaine mentions near the top in city after city. The health alarms echoed the street reality. It was a short, intense high with danger in every bowl and pipeline. For crews, the busy window never rested. The stash house stayed vital. Supply lines had to run clean. Lookouts and muscle had to be on point. The fast churn meant more beefs, more robberies, and discipline questions that lieutenants answered with force. The expanding network used tactics that got results. They dropped more than 100 crack or gatehouses across Kansas City in 18 months by 1986. Over 200 Jamaicans were tied to the web. Raids later pulled more than 180 handguns, dozens of assault rifles and machine guns, kilos of crack, and stacks of cash. It set a blueprint for flooding a town and locking it down. It showed investigators the loose 3-level build that made the machine run. Leaders kept hands clean and called shots. Lieutenants moved work, guns, and cash while arranging transport and people. Street dealers and runners handled daily sales and beef and did the shooting when the call came. The structure was light enough to dodge wiretaps, yet stiff enough to move product and pressure. Recruits landed in safe houses, got fresh clothes and new IDs, and learned cover stories with cheat sheets on fake names, jobs, and local details. Second-generation kids in New York joined up. Local Americans, often women, rented apartments and cars to keep the crew mobile and hard to track. The logistics were clever. False licenses and birth certificates were bought or faked, and insiders sometimes pumped data from state offices. A trooper helped print fraudulent licenses for a posse. A city health worker leaked birth certificates for a fee. Airports were avoided because soldiers wanted to stay armed, so trains and buses without scanners became the veins. Rental cars and U-Haul trailers carried weight across states with a rabbit car running behind to draw heat when blue lights flashed. Radios kept drivers locked in. If a decoy got burned, the main shipment slid away. Fresh loads hit quiet neighborhood stash houses. Retail moved from crack houses a few blocks off. Runners, often neighborhood kids, shuttled small bundles from stash to window. Iron doors replaced wood. Pit bulls watched the entry. Cameras scanned the street. Intercoms and windows worked sales with gloved hands hiding prints and details. When the posse set foot in a local gang's turf, tension popped. Sometimes there were talks, often there were shootouts. In one takeover plot, a leader even tried to buy a bazooka. Just as often, the market was so open, the posse simply undercut price, flooded the corner, and then lifted price after owning the customers. The approach took flight from Brooklyn strips to small town blocks. Order was kept with the straps bought in states with loose rules and shipped to home base. Favorite pieces included Mini Tech 9s, Ingram Mini Max, Glock 9mm, and AR-15s. Seizures showed piles of weapons and ammo. A Florida case traced 149 guns bought by 2 Jamaican nationals. Some crews even ran target practice to tighten shooters before missions. The money stacked at the street level and brought theft risks from low ranks that often ended in a body. Investigators tracked at least $1.5 million wired across American cities to leaders. Some cash went back to Jamaica. A lot stayed as hard currency, including a $1 million attic fine in a homicide case. Profits bought toys like boats and planes and parked funds in cover businesses, food spots, boutiques, racehorses, rental cars, trucking, body shops, import-export, real estate, record shops, and reggae events worked as fronts for washing money and meeting without heat. By late 1988, the feds swung hard with multi-city sweeps. Hundreds of Jamaican suspects were tagged in dozens of states. A 62-count Miami indictment named 34 Shower Posse members, including Blake and Jim Brown. It covered cocaine and marijuana smuggling, illegal gun buys, witness bribery, and 9 killings. 1 Miami hit haunted agents, 5 victims, 1 a pregnant woman found in a praying pose, shot 6 times. Even with arrests, the posses morphed. They changed names, addresses, and faces, and kept recruiting new shooters to keep the pipeline live. Agents struggled with language walls, patois on wiretaps, cycling nicknames, light lifestyles, and fearful witnesses. Task forces became the main weapon. Joint teams mixed federal charges, immigration holds, and gun cases to box in targets. The tactic worked better as intel pooled and speed increased. Houston, Miami, New York, and LA stayed hot. The logistics kept humming. Secure transport, stash and crack houses, volume sales, discipline, and wires sending money out. The same pattern kept repeating while the center of gravity stayed anchored to Kingston's garrison politics and the network name that recruited, intimidated, and enforced loyalty. While the U.S. cases piled up, the map widened. In 1987, an investigation targeted 16 Jamaican members controlling 3/4 of Rochester's crack market. By mid-1988, they were all cuffed on drug and weapons counts. A confiscated photo flashed semi-auto rifles like trophies. New York rival sets battled for corners. A crew known as the Rankers, or Southies, racked up murders, attempted murders, shootings, and kidnappings. Its leader had earlier links to the Shower Posse and later got hit with racketeering, firearms, and passport fraud. The streets lived by one rule: fight for turf, protect the pipeline, make examples of anyone who got slick. That code bled back to Kingston's lanes. Vivian Blake grew up broke in West Kingston, but earned a scholarship to St. George's College, then bounced to New York in 1973. In the city, he started pushing marijuana and cocaine, kept the grind tight, and built a coast-to-coast pipeline. A New York columnist later slapped a heavy tag on him, one of the creators of crack, saying Blake flooded Bronx spots like Soundview, Crotona Park, and Bronx River with tons of powder and rock. The name traveled, the phone stayed hot, and the crew moved weight while the streets tried to catch up to the numbers. When charges tied to the Miami multiple killing came up, Blake felt the block getting too warm. He dipped from the U.S. in 1988 on a cruise ship and slid back into Jamaica. The move bought time, but it didn't kill the case. He fought extradition on home turf for 5 years, trying to outlast the pressure while the feds stacked files and circled the wagons. The legend kept growing, but so did the heat. By 1999, the stare down ended. Blake got extradited to the U.S. after a decade-long chase that stretched across borders and courtrooms. Prosecutors in Miami now had to do more than point and shout. They had to rebuild an old case with new legs. The plan leaned on one voice that had crushed posse trials before, and that's where the whole thing almost fell apart. The government's star hitter was Cecil Connor, the same man juries knew for cold blood detail in past trials. He had entered witness protection, changed his name to Charles Miller, and then bounced back to St. Kitts. U.S. and British agents said he became one of the Caribbean's biggest cocaine smugglers, got indicted in Miami in 1995, and has been the target of a U.S. extradition bid ever since. Without him on the stand, Blake's defense pushed hard, arguing the case leaned on voices with rap sheets and deals. Defense filings said the government's evidence lacks credibility because it came from co-defendants and convicted players. Prosecutors stayed quiet in public and firm in private, saying there would be no new deal from Miller and that they could run the case without him. The fight was never just about one OG. It was about a pipeline that moved product, packed heat, and left neighborhoods on edge from Kingston to New York to Miami. Vivian Blake didn't just run with the crew. He shaped a whole lane. Even a federal judge in a past posse trial had said off the record, "It's not uncommon to find in federal prosecutions that the government's star witness is worse than the people on trial. But that's a fact, and we have to live with that too. But I always find that amazing." Blake's lawyer called him a businessman and a screenplay writer, not a murderer or a kingpin. Blake himself ran half-page ads in Jamaican papers, saying the whole case hung on Miller, that Miller was free, and that he, Blake, was suffering in my own country, where I have never done anything wrong. He painted himself as a community leader in Tivoli Gardens, someone who grew up around killers and drug dealers, but wasn't one of them. It was a tight spin for a tight corner. While prosecutors said the Shower Posse sprayed cities coast to coast and Blake called shots behind the curtain. In 2000, Blake pled guilty to racketeering and conspiracy and admitted his role in the gang. The judge dropped 28 years on him, but parole came fast. After 8 years inside, he touched road and went back to Jamaica in January 2009. By then, the lore was stamped in 3 cities, and the blueprint for fear was already out in the wild. The set he helped build still had a name that made old heads lower their voice when they spoke on it. Back in Jamaica, Blake tried to keep a low profile. He was on dialysis, fighting kidney disease, but people around him said he was still lively. In his last days, he was his usual effervescent self and working on a screenplay about the same gang he founded in Brooklyn back in the 1970s. On the 21st of March 2010, at age 53, he died after a heart attack. No shootout, no cuffs, just a hard stop for a man who helped script a crack-era play the streets never forgot. The family lines kept the story moving in print and pain. His son, Dwayne Blake, wrote a 2003 book titled The Shower Posse, the most notorious Jamaican crime organization. His brother Paul was slain at his home in St. Andrew Parish, and nobody has been charged. Even after Vivian came home and then passed, people said the Shower Posse remained active. The brand was bigger than one man, and the myth kept getting airtime wherever the crew had once left bodies and money trails. Scholarship kid to Bronx plug, from parole to dialysis, from a screenplay in progress to a heart attack that froze the pen. The era he helped drive left scars in 3 cities, trained up soldiers on how to secure corners, and carved a name that still makes people whisper. Analysts said the Dons were born back in the 1970s when parties armed supporters, that the trade was simple and dirty: deliver votes, deliver services, get money by becoming middlemen for Colombian cartels. Then crack hit like gas on a brush fire. Cooks turned powder into off-white rocks with baking soda or ammonia and water, let it harden, cut it small, and packed it in little vials. Those rocks ripped through lungs in seconds, through a glass pipe or a crumbled smoke, and smacked the brain so hard users said it felt like having the top of their head blown off. The high came quick, the crash came mean, and the craving trained people to chase again and again because dopamine stayed jammed. Even while household surveys reported casual cocaine use dipping, the street story was different. The windows stayed busy, the gatehouses never slept, and the money turned corners into war zones that answered to dons who moved like field generals and kept the block on a short leash. In 1989, Charles Little Nut Miller got popped for trafficking and saw the walls closing in. So he flipped for immunity and walked straight into court with receipts. He told the judge and jury he had enforced for the JLP, and he said he had a CIA link that kept doors open and phones warm. Then he hit them with the line that rang through every newsroom and station house: "The United States made me what I am." He did not dodge the blood either. He tied himself to 9 murders, laying out how the streets, the politics, and the foreign hands all stirred in the same dirty bucket. No riddles, no gloss, just a blueprint of how power moved from the lane to Parliament, chatter, and back again. His testimony felt like a flare in a dark sky. Crews clocked it, lawmen clocked it. The game understood that a posse code could be cracked in open court when one insider decided the time had come to talk. That is why the room fell quiet when he mapped the pipeline and named his role in it. Everyone could see the reach. Everyone could feel the pressure spread from Kingston tenement yards to American indictments already rolling in hot. By 1990, those papers had names on them. U.S. indictments called out Jim Brown and crew, and the knock came with force. ATF, U.S. Marshals, and Jamaican police moved as one and took him down. They parked him in the General Penitentiary in Kingston, holding him to be shipped to the States on drug and murder charges. Power that once rode through Tivoli now sat behind bars, waiting on a plane and a calendar. Then February 1992 delivered a twist that set the island talking. Right after his eldest son, Mark Ja T. Coke, was killed, a fire ripped through Jim Brown's cell and burned him to death. No clean source, no easy answers. Whispers called it murder because flames in this world erase questions and leave only smoke. The family line kept bleeding. His daughter, Mumpy, later died in a shootout where her husband was also killed. The crown did not disappear though. It slid to his adopted son, Christopher Coke. The block called him Dudas, Pressy, and President. He stepped in and tightened the garrison like a vice, set rules, and made the lanes answer when he spoke. In Tivoli, the night carried his name. At a dance, a DJ threw the words into the crowd like a siren. "The president is here," and everybody knew exactly who held court. He walked with hero pull and wrote a rule book like a don. Curfews pushed kids off corners by 8 p.m. Orders made men work and forced thieves to look elsewhere. Markets ran clean under his glare. He bankrolled food stalls, school fees, and medical bills. Children got sent to class, clinics and a computer school went up. The produce market stayed safe. Some likened him to Robin Hood because the bread reached the lane, but the protection piece stayed grim. Inside Tivoli, his presidential clique gunmen guarded the area with illegal firearms imported from the United States, protected stash houses, handled narcotics disputes, and flexed in elections. Papers called Tivoli a garrison under his patrol. Young men carried heat, guarded entrances, and watched the pipeline like hawks. Across the water, the U.S. kept stacking pages. John Rapley warned that over time, the tail wagged the dog, that even if leaders wanted to cut gangs loose, many could not. A point backed by Mark Shields of Scotland Yard fame, who said intel pointed to a huge arsenal in Tivoli, and recalled a 3-day standoff in 2001 that left 26 dead. Cops said the posse pulled off hits that shook the whole Caribbean crowd. A packed Fort Lauderdale hall where a reggae DJ got dropped, a Bunchy Park soccer game where pro baller Colin Fowles got killed, a Miami crack house slaughter, and a warehouse sting that turned into a gun battle where 2 henchmen died in a blaze. That's the Shower playbook in Miami. Roll deep, bring heat, leave fear. August 15th, 1992. Taste of the Island's nightclub, North Miami-Dade. The shooters came for one rival. Instead, they opened up on the whole dance floor. 4 people died. 17 got hit. One victim was Hilda LaToy Reynolds, a 17-year-old who wanted to teach. Her parents, Elonia and David, moved out of Miami Gardens after. The rage was too heavy. Elonia said it straight. I felt that I would see young boys on the street and run my car over them. Then the line that cuts deep. Why are you able to be alive and not my child? On August 28, 2009, Manhattan prosecutors unsealed an indictment naming Christopher Michael Koch as leader of the Shower Posse, the local Don, since the early 1990s, listing aliases like Presi, General, President, Dadas, and Shortman. They charged conspiracy to distribute cocaine and marijuana and conspiracy to traffic firearms. They branded him a C-pot, one of the world's most dangerous narcotics kingpins. The DEA's New York Field Division and Caribbean Division sent an extradition request through diplomatic channels, and that paper hit Kingston like a grenade. Prime Minister Bruce Golding, member of Parliament for West Kingston, challenged the legality of the request. He argued the U.S. wiretaps were warrantless and broke Jamaican law. In a March 16, 2010 Parliament sitting, the opposition's Dr. Peter Phillips cited an alleged contract with the U.S. law firm Manat, Phelps & Phillips to lobby Washington on the treaty fight sparked by the refusal to sign. Golding denied it was a government deal, even as a U.S. FARA filing showed a $40,000 contract to represent Jamaica. Minister Carl Samuda said JLP figures had asked Harold Brady to open talks with U.S. authorities. On May 11th, Golding told Parliament he sanctioned lobbying by the party, not the government. The line did not cool the flame. The People's National Party, its youth arm, and the National Democratic Movement demanded his resignation. Manat said it was contracted on behalf of the government through Brady and then severed ties. On May 17th, Golding went on TV, apologized for his role in the Manat affair, and said he was ready to step aside as prime minister and party leader. The JLP executive kept him in the seat. He promised reforms, portfolio reassignments, impeachment laws, term limits, and party finance rules. Then he confirmed Attorney General and Minister of Justice Dorothy Lightbourne would sign authorization to start the extradition case against Koch. That flip switched the street into war prep. Koch's supporters raised barricades at every Tivoli entrance, burned out cars, sharp metal, cement slabs, electrified barbed wire, maze layers, and traps. Security forces staged to serve the warrant and stared at a fortress. On May 23, 2010, the spark hit the powder. Gunmen assaulted 4 police stations in southwest Kingston, looting and partially burning one and later torching another. The state answered with around 1,000 police and soldiers who launched on the public housing complex, where heavily armed gunmen dug in to defend doo-doos. Cartel shooters swarmed West Kingston, traded fire with lawmen, and trapped civilians in their homes. The joint JCF-JDF operation aimed to arrest Koch, clear blockades, restore order, and recover illegal guns. Tivoli was fortified like a bunker. Molotov factories and ammo dumps stood ready. Electrified barbed wire blocked the main entrance. Cooking gas cylinders became IEDs with electronic fuses. Manholes were uncovered and filled with spikes. Roads were lined with hidden bombs. JDF helicopters saw sandbagged roadblocks with 3 to 4 men at each post, armed with AKs and Molotovs. Snipers sat on roofs to drop lawmen before they could clear a path. Colonel Rocky Meade said the defenses looked like a well-organized militia had built them, noting it took soldiers 2 hours to move 200 meters at the start. Overhead, a surveillance aircraft marked for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, identified as a Lockheed P-3 Orion, flew Kingston skies on May 24th and beamed live video of Tivoli Gardens via U.S. law enforcement to Jamaican ground forces. The Jamaican government denied the aircraft's presence, and National Security Minister Dwight Nelson repeated the denial after the New Yorker wrote about the raids. Later, Prime Minister Andrew Holness admitted a U.S. aircraft helped gather information. That same night into May 25th, the government declared a state of emergency in Kingston and St. Andrew for 1 month. May 24th was a public holiday, but there was no calm. Security forces cut through the wire and fought into the warren of Tivoli while gun battles spread to other garrisons. By May 26th, police said more than 500 people were in custody and raised the civilian death toll to 44. An independent assessment team said conditions inside Tivoli were appalling. People were stuck in homes with no food, no running water, and waste stacked in view. Dozens of children and toddlers were lost in Rasta City. One wounded woman lost her 18-month-old son on the way to the hospital. The morgue lined up with young men under 30. Golding said the government deeply regretted the loss of life, especially among security forces and innocent citizens caught in the crossfire. Journalists were ordered to keep back as cartel gunmen burned buildings and looting broke out. On May 27th, police said they had located the corpses of 73 civilians, with 2 police and 1 soldier killed. Reporters got clashing stories. Residents claimed a massacre and a cover-up. Independent observers like political ombudsman Bishop Harold Blair and public defender Earl Witter visited and expressed satisfaction with conditions, and residents praised soldiers' conduct. By May 28th, security forces had seized 22 illegal firearms and 8,550 rounds. May 29th numbers showed 58 security force injuries, 30 soldiers and 28 police. Colonel Meade said Koch's militia was very well organized and that resistance stayed fierce for about 12 hours. Slides and video from the operation showed barricade-wired IEDs, plastic explosives, shrapnel, rifles, handguns, and men strolling high-rises with guns and binoculars. Soldiers found a closed-circuit TV system inside Koch's presidential clique office, monitoring all Tivoli entrances, along with large amounts of local and foreign currency. Police Commissioner Owen Ellington said some of the dead were dressed like females when shot. He denied that police had buried any bodies and said badly decomposed corpses, slated from May Penn Cemetery, were moved to a facility that could store them until proper ID, with post-mortem scheduled and photos to be posted on a Tivoli billboard. By May 30th, the last group detained during the near week-long push walked out. More than 700 men had been held and about 400 lacked Tivoli addresses. Many were suspected to be members of other criminal networks from across the island who had come to support Koch and who gave false names. Most were released after processing, but more than 50 were held on warrants, and a large number were tagged as persons of interest under watch. Deputy Commissioner Charles Scarlett rejected claims of abuse and said groups like the Red Cross had inspected detention centers and were satisfied. Meanwhile, investigators suspected an explosive expert, backed by former JCF and JDF members dismissed for various reasons, and thugs loyal to Koch, had masterminded the elaborate defenses. LPG cylinders were laced with explosives and steel to maim. Molotovs were stacked. Roadblocks were built from old cars, scrap metal, crates, pallets, sandbags, barrels, and discarded household junk. The more elaborate blocks were sandbag camouflage concrete slabs with peepholes. High-rise rooftops were prepared as lookout posts and signaling centers with truck tires ready to be lit to create smoke screens against helicopters. Ultimately, all those defenses were overcome in the joint operation mounted after the May 23rd station attacks. 14 stations were hit and 2 burned down. Ongoing searches in West Kingston on May 29th and 30 added 8 more illegal firearms, bringing the total to 36, with 9,241 rounds for SLRs, AK-47s, and M16s. The political storm kept rolling. Civil society, churches, and parties called for Golding to resign. With his party backing him, he stayed. The opposition tabled a motion of no confidence, and on June 1st, 2010, after a 4-hour debate led by Portia Simpson Miller, the motion failed 32-28 along party lines. By May 31st, the gun count hit 40 and more than 9,200 rounds, with 7 weapons found among debris in garbage trucks leaving Tivoli. Commissioner Ellington explained many thugs had been shot from over 300 yards, giving residents time to lift guns from fallen shooters before lawmen could safely retrieve them. He voiced doubts that all bodies recovered were casualties of the operation because some were in advanced decomposition. On June 22, 2010, Kingston police grabbed Koch at a roadblock on the outskirts as he tried to reach the U.S. Embassy to surrender. He was riding in a car with Reverend Al Miller, the evangelical preacher who had helped arrange his brother's surrender earlier that month, and Miller said they were en route to hand Koch over. Reports said Koch wore a woman's disguise. Green said he had ducked police for weeks off the strength of a wide support net, with senior business people and other allies keeping doors open and eyes averted. Koch feared ending up like his father, who many suspected was silenced to stop him from naming names. Security Minister Dwight Nelson said Koch was locked in an undisclosed max security spot and his life would be protected. Paul called it a real blow against Don culture. Untouchable no more. 2 days later, security forces swept Tivoli again and pushed the haul to 88 guns and over 14,000 rounds. The haul included more than 40 pistols and 45 rifles and shotguns, ranging from submachine guns and Type 56 assault rifles down to .22 pistols, plus 19 grenades, 32 IEDs, and 34 other explosive devices. On June 24th, Coke waived his right to an extradition trial in a short, heavy security hearing at a military post in Kingston. He got flown under DEA and U.S. Marshals custody to New York. On June 25th, prosecutors announced his arrival to face conspiracy counts, repeating that since the early 1990s, he led an international organization known as the Shower Posse, with members in Jamaica, the United States, and other countries. They said that at his direction, they sold marijuana and crack in New York and elsewhere, and sent narcotics proceeds back to him and co-conspirators, and that he and his crew armed the organization with illegally trafficked firearms. U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara framed it clean, saying drugs and guns were the posse's bread and butter, and added they were relieved the transfer was not marked by the violence that had gripped Jamaica. DEA's John P. Gilbride said the arrest took a dangerous kingpin off the street and showed how domestic and international partners can track traffickers wherever they hide. In court papers, the U.S. offered a tight example from May 2007 when a Bronx trafficker failed to pay a drug debt to a clique member, and Coke and others agreed the man should be assaulted. It was proof of how he ran protection, settled disputes, and kept tribute flowing as members distributed marijuana, cocaine, and crack in New York City, Miami, and Kingston, and sent back cash, electronics, or guns, while supplying him with firearms acquired in the U.S. On August 31, 2011, he pled guilty before Judge Robert P. Patterson to racketeering conspiracy and conspiracy to commit assault with a dangerous weapon in aid of racketeering. Bharara said that for nearly 2 decades, Christopher Coke led a ruthless criminal enterprise that used fear, force, and intimidation to support drug and arms trafficking and move contraband between Jamaica and the U.S. with impunity, and that the plea was a welcome close to an ugly chapter. As March 2012 sentencing neared, prosecutors laid out the darkest details. They said he once ordered a rival killed with a chainsaw. They said women were used as mules to smuggle cocaine into New York or Miami by concealing it in their bodies. They said a woman who refused was gang raped and murdered. Several women wrote to the judge asking for a harsh sentence and anonymity because they feared being targeted by the Shower Posse if their names went public. On the other side, letters from Jamaica spoke to his good deeds: youth soccer leagues, school supplies, and Christmas gifts for children, Easter parties for seniors, medical bills paid for sick neighbors, and a computer school. One line said his constant message was, "Peace is the answer." The court measured the split image against the record and then spoke in years. On June 15th, 2012, the Manhattan court sentenced him to 2 consecutive terms, 20 years for racketeering and conspiracy, and 3 years for conspiracy to commit assault. The wider world tracked the fallout. Airlines canceled flights to Kingston. Foreign governments issued travel warnings. Cricket matches moved to Trinidad. Back in May 2010, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights had called for an impartial inquiry, and Amnesty International and the island's third party echoed it. In 2013, the government of Jamaica announced the Tivoli inquiry chaired by Sir David Simmons with Justice Hazel Harris and Professor Anthony Harriet, which began sitting in December 2014 to examine an operation that had started with a warrant and barricades and turned into a national reckoning. Through it all, opposition lawmaker Peter Phillips had said in May 2010 that Jamaica stood at a crossroads between restoring law and order and sliding into narco statehood, warning the island was leaning toward the wrong road, if not already there. That line cut the debate like a blade because Kingston was not just coke and guns. It was votes, contracts, and shadow power that ran a second-tier justice system under a Don's word, where disputes got handled in the lane. Tribute kept a ruler in place, and soldiers on rooftops stared through scopes at the country's future. American broadcasters called Golding a known criminal affiliate of Coke, which he called extremely offensive. The State Department said evidence in the indictment was properly collected under existing agreements, and the extradition request properly submitted. Even 3 days into the mission, police said they did not know where Coke was. A month later, he hit their roadblock in disguise, got caught, flown north, pled out, and got 23 years. The streets he ruled kept the scars. The cities he touched kept the memories of a gang that built its fame by promising showers and delivering storms. Nearly 20 years after Hilda's murder, Elonia still sees one face when she hears the name: Christopher Dudas Coke. She wants him shipped north to face the pain her family carries. Her words hit like a verdict. This boy needs to be put on the next boat over here to face all of the horrors that he wrought. The story in Miami stays tied to that loss, and the name Shower Posse still makes people lower their voice. The grief matched the public count of blood and the reach of a Garrison brand that took Kingston, Miami, and New York into one gritty loop where politics, product, and power moved together and left nothing untouched. And from Tivoli lanes to Bronx blocks, the Shower Posse wrote a chapter that would not fade. Years later, the tension and history around West Kingston got memorialized. The documentary, 4 Days in May, Kingston 2010, created by Deborah A. Thomas with Junior Gabu Wedderburn and Deanne M. Bell, put eyes back on the struggle. Thomas also built an installation at the Penn Museum titled Bearing Witness, 4 Days in West Kingston. The title says it all, bearing witness, because the city still carries scars. And if a city remembers, the game is not over. It shifts to the page. Marlon James dropped A Brief History of 7 Killings, and in it, a gang called Storm Posse moves through a flipped version of Tivoli Gardens named Copenhagen City. Different name, same vibe. You can change the tag, but you cannot wash off that kind of street print. Fiction echoed real moves, and readers felt the pulse, but the screen would take it even further. The series Drug Lords aired an episode on Christopher Koch and the Shower Posse. Cameras, confessions, cold facts. The hustle that once ran blocks in Miami, New York, and Kingston now played in living rooms. The names were back in the spotlight. The myth met the record, and the world leaned in for what comes next. And on the ground in early 2014, Tivoli told the story plain. War signs hit you first, walls stitched with bullet holes, streets still half blocked by concrete, ripped up lampposts, and old barricades that Koch's loyalists used to slow down the state. The graveyard nearby tells the rest. Dozens of fresh tombs from those 4 days in May. People speak soft about it, but you can feel the heat still sitting on the block. Some still talk about doo-doos like he never left. Placards once said, "Jesus died for us, we will die for doo-doos." That worship turned discipline into order, and order kept the money running. When he fell, the skills stayed, and the men he trained kept the pipeline alive. Jamaica's politics had long played with fire. After independence, rich and poor lived worlds apart, and the ghetto yards swelled without basics. Parties built garrisons, armed the loyal, and traded votes for protection. The doo-doos affair showed how that deal backfired. The Dons had grown past control. The garrisons, like Tivoli, could now push back at the state. The country felt the truth. The Don system was not a backdoor game anymore. It was center stage. The blowback hit Parliament. Politicians said they needed distance from area Dons, but old habits die slow. Delroy Chuck put it plain. It is hard to break that umbilical cord. Decades of power had been built on that cord. Cutting it was never going to be clean. Koch's fall taught traffickers a cold lesson. Big profile brings big heat. U.S. indictments loved a face and a title. So the next wave switched up. Smaller crews, lower profile, same plugs, same roots. As Shower Posse operatives said, you see the same people, just hiding the brand to beat conspiracy charges. No more one big Don putting his name on the set. Quiet money only. The new model showed its teeth. Operation Next Day Air, 10 U.S. agencies on one ring, from Jamaica to New Jersey to California, 9 suspects gone. The links pointed back to West Kingston yards, but not to one Don or one posse. That was the point. Fragmented cells ran weight, kept calls tight, and let the heat chase shadows. With Mexico burning and the southern U.S. border stacked with security, the Caribbean lane lit back up. The DEA numbers told the story. Back in 2012, 87 tons of cocaine seized in the Caribbean, almost double the year before. Another 44 tons in just the first half of 2013. That route now took 14% of U.S.-bound coke. Boats moved, islands flipped to transit hubs. Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and Jamaica all felt the churn. The war made Jamaica look shaky, yet tourism dropped only 2.4% right after the unrest, and then climbed again. The seizures checked the pulse of the trade. Most murders stayed inside the garrisons, far from the beaches and resorts, but gangs from those garrisons still touched tourist zones. The hustle followed the money in places like Montego Bay. The island sold calm to visitors, while the blocks kept their own kind of order under street codes. Back when coke got grabbed and the state locked down the city, the numbers had dipped hard. Homicides fell from 1,683 in 2009 to 1,113 in 2011, a 34% drop. Mass arrests during the emergency helped that curve, but by 2013, the count crept back toward 1,200. The old fear returned. Without one boss calling shots, more young guns started testing lanes, and that meant more funerals, more candles on corners. Inside Tivoli, the throne stayed empty. No single Don rose to wear that crown. At least 4 different groups jockeyed for control. Residents felt the shift. Instead of one rule book, there were too many rules. Market man Roman O. Wilkins said it straight. Dudas may have done some bad things, but he kept order. Now you don't know who these bad men on the street are, and they are out of control. When order breaks, the noise gets loud. Random shots, new faces, shaky peace. The Dons once kept the lid on chaos for a price. After 2010, that lid came off. Between 2012 and mid-2013, tons of coke got grabbed on the water. The percentage headed toward the U.S. through the islands bounced up. That shift matched the border pressure to the west. When one door closes, traffickers test windows, and the Caribbean has a lot of windows. The new cells learned to keep shipments lean, phones cold, and the brand invisible. Leaders promised a new line. Less handshake with Dons, more law and order talk. Activists pushed for cleaner policing and answers for the dead. Families wanted names cleared and names named. The public defender's office dug into the Tivoli death toll. People argued numbers and blame, but on the lane, the real measure was simple. Who controls the night? Who secures the block? Who pays when the lights go out? The Shower Posse name still shook rooms in 2013. The Toronto press had called out ties that ran deep up north. U.S. indictments had painted the old weed and coke map from Tivoli docks to Florida. Ministers and cops in Kingston knew how long the reach had been. Dudas. 1992 to 2010 was the timeline written in cash stacks and court files, in seized boats and bullet-riddled doors. The fall of one Don did not erase that network. It only taught it to hide better. The 2010 incursion had proved one thing. Garrison gunmen can turn a police job into a national security crisis. 4 days of fire outpaced regular patrols. Barricades and rooftop rifles turned streets into trenches. When the smoke thinned, the state adapted. More joint ops, more intel, more pressure on known yards. But fragmented cells forced a new playbook. No headline boss means longer cases, slower hits, and constant cat and mouse. And while files stacked up, life on the lane had to adjust. In the middle of all the stats are regular people, shopkeepers who lock early, parents who walk kids through alleys they trust, young men who learned the trade under a Don and now freelance in tighter crews. Some residents still hope a single strongman returns to keep order by fear. Others want no more Dons at all. Either way, the vacuum pulls. Every corner with no referee becomes a test spot, and every test can turn into sirens. Even with new speeches and new laws, the old political temptation sits there. In rough seats, a nod from a respected area man can still swing ballots. Years of favors, contracts, and quiet deals do not disappear with one scandal. The question hanging over the next cycle is simple. When the race gets close, who makes the calls? Party offices or yard bosses? Kingston taught us how a neighborhood can feel like a nation, how a Don can move like a prime minister, and how one command can flip a whole city's heartbeat. Miami and New York showed the export model. Corners franchise, gatehouses humming, and tribute flowing like current through copper. From Massop's fall to Jim Brown's rise, from Vivian Blake's pipelines to Dudas Coke's iron grip, the story never walked in a straight line. It zigzagged through ballots and bullets, boardrooms and back alleys, lullabies and sirens. Documents stacked, bodies fell. Politicians called it process, the streets called it survival, and the brand that promised showers kept its word. We watched garrisons harden into fortresses, then splinter into cells when the spotlight got too bright. We watched the Caribbean lane heat back up when the western door slammed shut. We watched families light candles while lawyers traded filings. And we watched a myth refuse to die, living on in songs, in novels, in documentaries, in the way a corner goes quiet when a certain name gets spoken. Some folks still call it order, others call it occupation. Either way, the echo doesn't fade, it just changes rooms. So here we are, past the raids, past the barricades, past the headlines that promised an ending. The walls in Tivoli still carry the story in chipped paint and patched brick. The sea routes still whisper like old accomplices. And the vote count in certain seats still twitches when a yard boss clears his throat. The faces change. The playbook adapts. The stakes stay the same. When the next president steps onto the lane, will the crowd cheer or hide? If the cells stay quiet and the money stays clean, do you ever see the hand that holds the strings? When politics get tight, who gets the last phone call? The party office or the corner office? And after all the smoke and court dates, what does peace even mean on a block that learned to live by war? Let us know what you think in the comments box below. And if you liked how we presented you this video, hit that like button and make sure to subscribe for more.